Everyone feared the giant widow locked inside an iron cage, believing she was dangerous and heartless. But one quiet cowboy saw something no one else did: strength, dignity, and a woman worthy of freedom. What happened next shocked the entire town and changed two broken lives forever. Like. Share and subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The town of Red Hollow sat baked under the harsh sun of the American frontier, a place where rumors traveled faster than horses and fear ruled more than law. At the edge of the livestock market stood an iron cage, thick bars rusted from years of dust and neglect. Inside it lived Eliza Hart, a woman the town called the Giant Widow. She was taller and broader than most men, with shoulders hardened by years of labor. After her husband died in a mining accident, debt swallowed her land, her home, and finally her freedom. The town decided it was safer to keep her caged than to understand her grief. People whispered that Eliza was violent, that she had crushed a man's arm once, that her silence meant rage. None of it was proven, but fear did not need proof. Children were pulled away when they passed the cage. Men spat near her feet to show dominance. She endured it all without a word. Her hands, scarred and strong, gripped the bars each morning as she watched the town wake. She had learned that pleading only amused cruel hearts. So she stood tall, eyes steady, refusing to shrink for anyone. Inside her chest, though, loneliness pressed heavier than iron. Every week, traders and ranchers came through Red Hollow to buy cattle, tools, or labor. Eliza was listed like livestock, her strength advertised as a novelty. "One woman, strong as two men," the auctioneer would shout. Bids were rare. Most men feared being laughed at for buying her, others feared she would overpower them. Eliza stopped hoping long ago. Freedom felt like a memory from another life, buried with her husband beneath collapsed stone. She expected to die behind bars or be sold to someone cruel enough not to care about her humanity. On one quiet afternoon, a lone cowboy rode into town. His name was Caleb Monroe, a ranch owner from the open plains west of Red Hollow. He wasn't loud or flashy, just steady, with sun-worn skin and calm eyes that missed little. He came to town for fencing supplies and salt, but the murmurs near the market caught his attention. When he saw the cage, he stopped. Not because of her size, but because of the way she stood, unbowed, dignified, staring straight ahead as if daring the world to be better. Caleb watched how others treated her, how the auctioneer joked, how the crowd laughed nervously. Something about it unsettled him. He asked a nearby man who she was. The answer came easily, as if rehearsed: dangerous widow, too strong, better locked up. Caleb looked again. He saw no madness in her eyes, only exhaustion and pride held together by stubborn will. When their eyes met briefly, Eliza expected him to look away like the others. He didn't. He nodded once, not in pity, but acknowledgement. When the auction began, the crowd gathered more out of curiosity than interest. The auctioneer started low, raising his voice to mask the lack of bidders. Jokes followed. Someone shouted that she'd scare the cattle to death. Laughter erupted. Eliza clenched her jaw. Then, unexpectedly, a single voice cut through the noise. "I'll take her." Caleb raised his hand. The laughter died instantly. The auctioneer blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. "You're serious?" he asked. Caleb nodded again and named a price high enough to silence any doubt. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one challenged the bid. Papers were signed quickly, as if the town wanted the matter finished before it could be questioned. The cage door creaked open for the first time in years. Eliza braced herself, expecting chains or commands. Instead, Caleb stepped back and handed the key to the guard. "She walks out on her own," he said. Confusion flickered across Eliza's face as she stepped into the sunlight. Legs stiff from confinement, heart pounding with uncertainty. Caleb didn't order her to follow. He simply turned toward the saloon and said, "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in a while." The words were plain, without ownership or threat. Eliza followed at a distance, ready to run if this kindness proved false. Inside the saloon, conversation stopped. She felt every eye on her, waiting for chaos. Instead, she sat, ate quietly, and said nothing. Caleb paid and treated her as if her presence was ordinary, not a spectacle. After the meal, Caleb told her she didn't owe him obedience. He said he needed help on his ranch, but the choice was hers. If she wanted to leave, she could. The offer stunned her more than the cage opening had. Freedom had always come with conditions before. She studied his face, searching for deception, but found only sincerity. With nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose, Eliza agreed to ride with him for now. As they left Red Hollow behind. Dust rising in the fading light, Eliza felt fear mixed with something unfamiliar, hope. She didn't know that this decision would change not just her fate, but the life of the quiet cowboy riding beside her. For the first time since her husband's death, the road ahead did not feel like a dead end. It felt like a beginning. The journey to Caleb's ranch took 2 long days across open plains and rolling hills. Eliza rode in silence, watching the land stretch endlessly, unsure whether she truly belonged in such freedom. Caleb never pressed her with questions. He spoke only when necessary, offering water, pointing out safe crossings, or slowing his horse when hers tired. That quiet respect eased her nerves more than kind words ever could. Each mile away from Red Hollow felt like a weight lifting from her shoulders, though fear still lingered, cautious and watchful. When they reached the ranch, Eliza expected guards, rules, or isolation. Instead, she found a modest homestead surrounded by sturdy fences and wide pasture. The workers stared at her at first, unsure what to make of her size and reputation, but Caleb addressed her simply as Miss Hart. He gave her a small cabin near the barn and said she could rest as long as she needed. No locks, no threats. The absence of control unsettled her more than chains ever had. The first days passed slowly. Eliza helped where she could, mending fences and hauling feed with strength that surprised no one but herself. She worked hard not to prove worth but to quiet the voice that told her she was still owned. Caleb paid her fairly and thanked her openly, something she had not heard in years. At night she lay awake listening to crickets, learning what silence felt like without fear. Her body was free, but her mind still wore iron. The ranch hands gradually warmed to her. They saw that Eliza laughed softly when a calf escaped, that she shared food without being asked, that she never raised her voice in anger. Stories about her faded as new truths replaced them. One evening, after a long day, the group sat around a fire. Someone asked about her past. Eliza spoke for the first time about her husband, the mine, and the debts that followed. No one interrupted. When she finished, the fire cracked, and someone quietly handed her coffee. She realized then she was no longer alone. Caleb watched these changes with care, never interfering, never claiming credit. He admired Eliza's strength, but more than that, he admired her restraint. She carried pain without bitterness and power without cruelty. Over time, their conversations deepened. They spoke of lost families, long winters, and dreams they once thought impossible. Eliza learned that Caleb had turned down marriage before, not from lack of interest, but because he feared choosing wrong. With her, he felt something steady and true. One afternoon, a group of men from Red Hollow arrived at the ranch, claiming Eliza was still legally bound by debt. The air turned tense. Old fear surged through her, muscles tightening, ready to fight or flee. Before she could speak, Caleb stepped forward, documents in hand. He had cleared her debts the day he bought her freedom. The men left in anger, powerless. Eliza stood shaking, realizing someone had defended her without expecting gratitude. Tears came before she could stop them. That night, Eliza confronted the truth she had avoided. She was no longer surviving, she was living. The ranch had become home, and Caleb had become more than a protector. He was her equal. Under the wide Texas sky, they talked until dawn. Caleb admitted he had not bought her out of impulse, but recognition. He saw a woman broken by loss, yet unbroken in spirit. He asked nothing of her except honesty. Eliza felt her guarded heart begin to open. Weeks later, during a quiet evening near the corral, Caleb spoke carefully as if each word mattered. He told her he did not want to own land alone, nor face the future without her. He said marriage to him meant partnership, respect, and choice. Then he asked her to be his bride, leaving the decision entirely in her hands. There was no kneeling, no crowd, just truth between two people shaped by hardship. Eliza took a long breath. Memories of the cage flickered through her mind, followed by nights under open stars and days filled with purpose. She understood then that love was not about rescue, but recognition. She said yes, not because she needed safety, but because she wanted a life beside him. Caleb smiled, relief and joy crossing his face. And for the first time, Eliza felt seen not as a giant, a widow, or a rumor, but as a woman chosen freely, as seasons passed. The ranch thrived under their shared strength. The town that once feared Eliza would one day speak her name with respect. But none of that mattered as much as the simple truth she carried every morning. She woke up free, loved, and no longer caged by fear or the past. The giant widow had not been tamed. She had been understood, and that made all the difference.